We get on just great. You flirt. I smile.
Yeah, we're a team.
Well, hello there, faithful listeners. You are checking in on another mad romp with the Film Board from The Next Reel on rashpixel.fm. A gang of thugs has gathered here to jump right into a new movie freshly released in theaters and then expose all of its scaly and beautiful underparts so that it's spoiled thoroughly for you. This month may have equal parts scaly and beautiful as we rocket into science fiction future space with Luc Besson's Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets. The thugs out there in space, ready to attach their satellite to this satellite to create the Film Board's critical mass, are here. Say hello to Steve Sarmento.
I just flew in from Big Market, and boy, are my interdimensional hands tired.
How about you, Pete Wright?
Mawahialo. Mawatin Manuamo. Muwamantoa. Am I close?
It's new. It's one of the sectors on Alpha. And my name is JJ, and I don't have a clever language to write just yet. But we will shoot off into the deepest reaches of the universe in just a second or two. As we do, make sure you check out all the fun stuff about this show and its sibling shows at thenextreel.com. Subscribe to The Next Reel with your favorite podcast app and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel. We're posting clever content that we find or create about the movie industry. And if you're with us out there, you can see what new films we're talking about each and every week. Since you're with us here, consider joining with us on our Patreon page. For as little as $1 a month, you could become a patron of the show. It helps us make sure the goodness keeps growing and can set you up with some fun patron perks too. We keep the conversations flowing with access to our team's Slack channels. You can get early access to shows from our drafts feeds and some other special quirky fun benefits to experience our thug love. That page is found at www.patreon, which is spelled patreon.com/The Next Reel, and it's like a special clubhouse for filmophiles like us. So with that, let's drop out of Exospace and spend some time exploring this massive space mutant. Initial thoughts on Valerian. Pete, go.
You know, I'm a fan of Besson for the most part. I hated Lucy real hard. But largely I have found something to like, if not love, about almost every thing that he has done. And so, I went into this as a big fan of The Fifth Element. I really enjoyed that. It is the closest comparison that I have to this film, his return to space. It was not for me a Fifth Element. I missed the craziness of more of the characters. It weirdly felt more subdued than The Fifth Element. I miss Ruby Rod, honestly. I miss I miss those. I miss the what was the Flotsam Paradise. I miss that. I do. But the world building and the flamboyant use of color and the general optimism of the universe that Luc Besson creates, I think is something that wins me over in spite of what is otherwise some pretty tragic dialogue. There were also some things that I've never seen in this film. The big market sequence in Another Dimension, that was really cool and something that I'm going to be thinking about for a while. I thought that was really neat. And then you have the little sci-fi tropes, like the spider laser cutter rebreather, just in time for that one event, that amazingly specialized tool as a defense from an alien weapon. It was a kind of a moment. But overall, I found myself entertained. I was entertained.
Well, that's good, and I guess I want to ask questions about the specific things you found, because I think in applying it to how we evaluate this movie, it'll be interesting to see what we think is based here versus what we think is based from the original source material. Steve, how about you? Were you entertained?
I was entertained. For me, this was really like a spiritual sequel to The Fifth Element, and one thing that I was really sort of delighted to see was, so as we're seeing some of the aliens, being introduced, there were the ones that were in the big sort of like golden armor that sort of looked like they were somehow related to those Guardians from The Fifth Element, which sort of gave me the sense that we're back in that universe. We're seeing some, relationship to those things. And it just was a lot of fun. I haven't read the graphic novels, but I think one of the things that I noted watching this was I felt like if I go back on a second viewing or a third viewing, I can sort of see the relationship to the graphic novel source material of this is this, section of the graphic novel, this chapter or this volume, because there are these very defined sequences where we have different excursions or adventures. And to me, it sort of diverged from sort of a traditional 3-act structure because we had these different sequences, which felt very like these self-contained episodes. And I think that contributed to maybe some pacing problems, but overall, this was just a fun ride from beginning to end for me. I just sat back and let it wash over me and had a good time. Yes, there are some flaws, but overall, it's something that I really enjoyed experiencing.
Gotcha. And I think that's good that you mentioned the parts of the graphic novel and how it differs from the 3-act structure, because I mean, in the advertising for this film, they talked a lot about how this is a lifetime in the making. It's a source material that defined a generation. That's stuff that I wasn't aware of. I actually wasn't aware of the series beforehand. So I think how they executed on that, I think, is going to be important for our discussion here. You also mentioned that it was a ride. And I think for me, looking at the film, I didn't think it was super great. I was entertained early, and I was pulling for it a lot because I was really hoping for a lot from it. But it really felt like it was one of the, if I was at an amusement park and going on one of their indoor movie thrill rides, it felt like about the level of story that they approach those rides with. And then if you go to the extreme case of that, you've got, I saw it at a Regal Cinema here in Portland. And that roller coaster that they put you in to show you all the different things you can buy, and welcome to Regal Cinema. Please turn off your phone.
When that popcorn goes off, man, it sets me off. That's a trigger
how
moment.
I felt watching Valerian. I agree that it was a ride, and I think the ride stuff was pretty fun. But when you actually start to look at it as a film and for the story and really get into the execution, I thought the movie in itself was pretty bad. But that's, the interesting thing about this sort of heavy visual effects CGI thing. I was made interested in the film by the trailers. I have not seen Avatar because I have a strange, weird thing about James Cameron, but I get the sense that movies like this, the movies that are really kind of pushing you towards that visual narrative, are okay with being a great ride. And some of the sequences I thought were really, really neat rides for that. So I think it'll be interesting to see how we talk about that going forward. The next thing we should talk about is script, but I think we're kind of skipping a little bit of the story here. We should talk about the story a little bit as well. How did you guys feel about the story pieces that went in there? Pete, you mentioned a couple different pieces there. Maybe we start with the big market. It was a really cool effect. How did it fit with the story for you?
Yeah, as I sort of expect with films like this, it's a giant set piece that's designed to, sort of explode in your face and move you to the next giant set piece. And for that, I take it as what it is. And I was wowed by it. But when you step back and look at the story that they're trying to tell, it fits in the arc. It gives us a chance to see how these two characters, Valerian and Laureline, work together, how they interact with one another, and see, if the sort of charisma that they have between one another, and it shows off their skills. And so we get to see kind of how they are able to execute a complex mission and use the team and the ship and finally escape into exospace. And it's all fine. It was a showcase of lots of lights and swirly things. I actually found I really enjoyed the story itself, right? The narrative. I mean, it's telling the story of this species that was their planet was annihilated as an accident, right? It was collateral damage from another mission, another human war that was taking place in space above, and so the remaining members of the species are trying to rebuild. They're trying to recreate their own planet, and they need this one last little rodent. It is the rodent that is the rodent copy machine.
The rodent of all rodents.
It is the rodent of all rodents. And when you jam a pearl in its mouth, a pearl of untold energy, the rodent spits out. It just craps out thousands of pearls just like it. It is the most incredible copy machine that you've ever seen. And this, feels very much like a Luc Besson story, right? This feels like directly out of the imagination of this guy. And I found myself really attracted to that because it took me to that space of of, hey, I'm 10 years old and I'm playing in my bedroom, and this is the kind of thing that I would do. Like, I wonder what would happen if I jammed this thing into the mouth of that thing. Would it crap out more things? Like, that is the thing that I would do. So I found myself really attracted to that. It had that sort of youthful charisma.
Interesting that I found that part of the story as well. That part of the story with the collateral damage and the sort of macro story over the top. I found that very captivating. The character development part of the story I felt was lacking. And you mentioned the word charisma. When we get into cast, I really want to talk about the perceived charisma between the people there. Steve, in terms of story, did you talk about going away from the 3-act structure? What about the story did work for you that wasn't traditional?
Well, I think it's got an interesting opening sequence that for me really sets the tone. Where
I thought that was great.
The origins of where Alpha comes from. This is a community that's based on sort of like international, interstellar welcoming of new people. And we see that play out from 1975 up to wherever we are, 2400 and whatnot, of just seeing this community that continues to grow and is always open to new visitors. And to me, that really set this tone of what this place is like. Then we get sort of this jarring shift to this crazy, beach resort planet that is like the most peaceful place ever, and we see it destroyed. So then I wonder, where are we going? Because we spent a lot of time without even being introduced to our main characters. When we finally get to them, then it sort of becomes this sort of, we've got the big market heist scene, and then it's the MacGuffin of the rodent and the pearl and who's got it and where is it, and the chase about the red zone. And to me, that part, once we get to them, that's where we kick into very episodic sequences. It's first the big market heist, which I loved. That sequence, it was just thrilling, did so many innovative things. The way that was shot, just visually just stunning. I had a great time with that. Once we get to Alpha, we sort of fall into now we've got our story, we've got our MacGuffin, we've got this mystery of this red zone, and then we get into lots of back and forth between Valerian and Laureline on their quest to find the missing commander, and then what's going on with the general. And there were several times where it was just the back and forth of, hey, have you found the commander yet? No, but now we've got to do this thing. Okay, well, we're going to keep trying to figure out what's going on. Great, we're going to continue on our adventure. And it just felt a little bit repetitive of, here's another sequence where they're exploring a new part of Alpha, and the general still doesn't know what's going on because he's locked out of all the information. And it felt I felt like it stalled a little bit because the story wasn't really progressing. I enjoyed the excitement and adventure and visual stimulation of the different places they were exploring in Alpha, but really the story isn't really progressing because we're not getting any new information really. It's just, here's another obstacle. We're going to have this new alien that we were encountering. It's a new place that we're going to explore, and then we move on. And to me, that's where it strayed from the 3-act structure, because we don't have that continual progression towards like smaller victories in resolving the conflict, because all they're doing is trying to find where the commander is. It's not helping solve the mystery of who are these people. They're back. The Pearls people, are they good guys or bad guys? Because we know their planet was destroyed. Have they gone just like completely unhinged and they're out to destroy everyone else? What is going on? And we don't have a lot of information. It's just more of the episodic, thrill of, here's the next chapter of exploring Alpha. So that's where I felt like visually it was fun and I enjoyed going along with it, but story-wise is where we sort of like flatline, and we've got a MacGuffin and we're just not progressing. And so to me, that's one of the weaknesses with that I think for a rewatch, that's why I want to see sort of how that breaks down, to sort of map that out a little bit to see what's going on story-wise, because maybe I was distracted by so much of the visual that maybe there's more information or other things that I can piece together.
It's tough too, because that's a lot like a comic book series, or
right?
A graphic novel series, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of matching the nature of the original source material in this piece. But to say that, if you are being critical of what you're seeing there, you see maybe those action sequences as kind of episodic Deus Ex Machina to move the story along, which in general, I think the story, other than that sort of macro concept of the collateral damage piece, I think the story concept of in and of itself was somewhat weak. It's more of a vehicle to get everything here on screen. I don't know that that's a problem, though. I think that's something that we need to talk about as well. As far as the comic in itself, are either of you guys familiar with it? I'm not familiar with it. Someone in our notes here says it started in '67. Is that right?
Yeah, it ran from '67 to 2010. The creators of the comic, Pierre Christin and Jean-Claude Mézières, are 80 now, and I believe they're retired. I don't profess to be an expert on the background, but I know that Besson is a huge fan of these guys and has been for a long time, and he has been trying to get this film out of his head and onto screen for a long time. And he says, when I approached these guys, they said, Luke, you have to get out of the bubbles of the story. You have to surprise us. That these guys were very much not guardians of the temple. And so, I would suspect that this is as much a Luc Besson vision as it is equal parts that of Kristen and Mézières.
Well, and we talked about that first sequence, the science sequence attaching to the ISS and whatnot. I would be super curious. I'm sure the three of us can't answer this question right now, but I would be super curious to see if that's a concept that was developed in the graphic novel itself, or if that's something that Besson put up, because I think that was really clever and well executed with Major Tom over the top. I mean, the first part of this movie, I was really excited for what we were going to see.
Yeah, and I think that when you get to the script, in particular dialogue, that's when, for me, it starts falling apart. We have this wonderful sequence at the beginning, and it shows a lot of heart and appreciation of history as we're building this future, and that is one of the things that Besson is really good at. Is world building. I think he just has a real knack for showing attention to detail in this flamboyance of space. But then our leads open their mouths and they start doing that whole dance around. Oh my God, the marry me thing. I'm done. I'm done. Don't get married.
No.
Elope. I'm done. I am so done. And it's that thing, it's like, God, why does this movie keep hitting itself? Every time they open their mouths, I feel like it's a movie that is just smacking itself about the head. And so I acknowledge that, once we start talking about production design and the look of the film, I'm a huge apologist for this film because it had a lot of ground to recover that it lost in straight up script and dialogue. It's terrible.
Well, and I would argue, and we're not really to cast yet, but I would argue that not delivered particularly well too. But there's not a whole lot of material there to go on.
That's
so. It's like the story, the things that were developed in this movie were not the sort of high ground pieces about story and dialogue. It really was the time that they spent to make these effects work.
Well, it was challenging. We're walking into this relationship that clearly has been going on for a while.
Has it though? Did it feel like that to you?
That's what I think that's the challenge of, because it's not like the romantic comedy where you've got the meet cute and you've got the opportunity to fall in love with this relationship or understand what the source of friction is. We sort of get thrown that he's this like womanizer with this, long history of his playlist, but it seems like they clearly they've been working together for a while. I would think it seems like they're and that's what I'm struggling with is I don't have the backstory, and we sort of get thrown into it.
To guess it.
Yeah, so there's the witty banter that they're trying for with them, and just we don't have the foundation. Number one, and secondly, I think it's the challenge of the script and then the casting to really flesh that out and make it believable, and it just fails on that because I see what they're striving for, but they're just falling so far short of that because I want to have that fun relationship, this playful interplay between them that I think is a nice balance to the action, but it just was not executed at that level, and it just really causes all these, I think, problems with the film that gets in the way of itself.
Well, and I gotta say, I really think all of the character stuff, it goes straight back to the script. I feel like we have too much evidence of, Dahan and Cara Delevingne doing really solid work in other films. This is not just a mistake casting somebody brand new that we've never seen who actually couldn't pull their weight.
Well, the question I just asked was, have they been together really that long?
Yeah,
The next
I got
question
that
is,
totally,
is
though.
their-
I felt like they totally were. I mean, there was
is
no
their
question.
relationship
for me.
appropriate, or is it not?
It's an HR disaster.
Well, but I mean, what is the movie trying to say? Because that's the problem, is I couldn't tell whether they were breaking the rules or not.
Yes. Okay. This gets to my first challenge with Dane DeHaan, right?
Yeah.
That it is written as a conflicted character, and I don't think there's much he could do with it as an actor, because on the character's part, you can't be the scruffy-looking nerf herder and the rule-following soldier boy at the same time. It just doesn't work. And those two elements were coming headlong in contact with one another every time he was on screen. He is not a rebel and a soldier. He wasn't, in order for him to have that sort of playboy thing, he'd have to come off as Han Solo, and he was no Han Solo because he kept trying to be a soldier.
And the piece there is, if he has that checkered past, which he kind of explores a little bit when they take him into the temptation of Paradise Grove or whatever the area is called, right? They try to bring that up, but then what he's trying to convince us of as a character throughout the entire film is that no, he has this undying love for his partner. And this goes back to the same sort of conflict we had relationship dynamic wise that we explored last month in The Mummy, where it was, you've got this gadabout in Tom Cruise that is all of a sudden falling in love with this straight character, right? This straightforward paleontologist, and we're supposed to believe X without having to see any sort of character development to bring us to X. So, whether Dane DeHaan was given the piece to do that conflicted character ended up with a character mush.
To me, I thought about it. It's like they threw us into like season 2 of Moonlighting, where there's been all this like, won't they get back together, or won't they get together? And so
what happened?
Yeah, we don't have all that, but I felt like that's the backstory that was hidden from us, of that they've been working together. He likes her, she's got a thing for him, but clearly she doesn't trust him because he's with all these ladies. So there's this supposed to be this tension between them, and now we're at the point where he's ready to sort of commit or make that decision possibly, but we've missed out on all of that interplay before. And I think that's the we spent more time with our little paradise planet getting the exposition on those people, where I felt that we would have been better served to have a little bit more about these two, rather than trying to condense it into the, little sequence we have right there in the little holodeck.
I liked that sequence, actually, and that's when I was still bought into the film. It wasn't when they it wasn't until they tried to marry the two stories that I lost faith in either of them, unfortunately. Talking about Besson in particular, I have one question that we haven't really addressed. Because this is a French graphic novel, and because it's talked about so largely as defining a European generation and whatnot, is this yet another case that this is something we've explored in earlier films this year too, of a film that's being made for a non-American box office?
I think it's got to be considered given the global market. And I guess that is the other piece. Is it a cultural translation issue?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you spend $180 million on a movie and not make it for a global audience. There were an awful lot of different languages and fonts. So,
well, they better not, because we're jumping ahead here, but it's only made $16 million this week.
That's the thing that I worry about, right? So it's a $180 million movie that made for a global audience that isn't connecting with the globe. Whether or not we connect with it is, notwithstanding, it's not connecting with its intended audience either, apparently.
Yeah. Well, and
I don't know. Is it? Have we hit? I assume we've hit worldwide release. I didn't look. When did it open worldwide?
The only thing that I've seen is American numbers, but they're paltry. And that's, I mean, the reason why I bring up the source material in this is because I'm trying to confess my ignorance in whether or not that the popularity of this source material is going to carry it with global legs, because it's not going to work here with what it's up against.
So Asia, Western Europe, it's all open. I take that back. No, this weekend It opened in the rest of Asia and the USA. It opens Belgium, Finland, France. It doesn't even open in France until the 26th. So give it a chance,
So
right? I mean,
that's
it's
the
most
thing.
of the world is not it hasn't seen it yet, and certainly Western Europe isn't seeing it yet.
Right. And we saw
So
at
there
the
you go.
beginning that there's Asian money behind it. But beyond that, the fact that the legacy character, the legacy stories, the people who probably understand these characters better than we'd be able to do are going to be those French, I would assume most of Western Europe is going to have an affinity for these characters that we might not be able to understand.
And it won't open in the UK until August 2nd. I don't know. I mean, maybe this is a Luc Besson thing that we just don't get. I feel like it's pretty easy to make these comparisons to the last several movies that he's made, and this was less of a flagrant sort of disregard to intelligence that Lucy was.
Well, what else do we need to say about Besson? I mean, this is his passion project, right? And the Fifth Element, in and of itself, I would call it polarizing for our group of thugs out here in the world. But from what I understand from everybody I know, that The Fifth Element is a pretty polarizing film about its popularity. What other fingers of Besson are touching this here, and how is it going to hit people, do you think?
Fingers? That's weird.
I'm thinking of his fingers on the controls of the film.
No, I the way I understand it, he is a pretty controlling guy when it comes to writing characters. But the way he talked about it in this, some of the behind the scenes stuff is he says he's really worked hard to broaden his horizons on the creation of it. And so, I think he should be lauded for his world building and the detail that goes into even the most ancillary characters. His character Bibles are legendary. In this one, he gave 10 pages per alien in the character Bible, and there are 200 unique aliens, and each alien not only has all of their sort of biological, psychological detail in this character Bible, but they're mapped to a specific star in the known universe. So,
Wow.
So they know exactly where these aliens came from when they came to Alpha.
Are they selling that?
Are they selling the Bible? That I don't know, but I do know that all these actors all the actors were required to study the complete Bible to understand all the characters they're working with in each scene. And that Besson says he quizzed them as they came onto scene. You're dealing with this particular character. Where did it come from? Well, it's a water character. What does it eat? Those sorts of things. So I think he is this attention to detail is absolutely on screen in the production design, even if it's not so apparent in the dialogue itself. I think the world building is on display in the big market sequence, in spades, right? He actually says it was the most difficult scene to shoot and direct conceptually because, once you see it on screen, and I absolutely had a great experience with it. There was nothing in the big market sequence that didn't make sense to me visually.
True.
And he said, before we did that, just looking at the paper of the script, it made no sense, and he had real trouble communicating what it was that he wanted to see on screen. So he took a bunch of phones, mobile phones, and little cameras, and went over to a film school. And he took 200 students, and they went out and they shot the entire thing by hand. And then they put a bunch of sound and music to it, and they handed it to Thierry Arbogast, the cinematographer, so he could make sense of it and say, oh, I get it now. I get what you want to do. I get it. It's a great story about how to shoot a cinematic and shows that sort of attention to detail to building this world that we've never seen before. And I think he is great at that.
Well, and that's why I ask you if they're selling that script, the Bible, because it's like
You'd rather read that?
Well, it reminds me of I don't even remember what movie it's from, but the line, I play real sports, not trying to be the best at exercising, right? Like he's doing a great job of making the movie. But the movie isn't so great, like way to go. You're quizzing the actors on the Bible. That's so great. Are you going to sell that? Is that revenue going to help against the production cost?
I was using that as a story to support my support of Besson, and you just turned it right around, man.
I think it's beautiful, but that's great. Like, I'm so glad that people are going to listen to our show and hear about that. But the $16 million that they made this weekend on it, it's not going to report out for all that wonderful stuff that he did in the background.
Well, speaking of Besson, my favorite films of his, one of the dynamics that I always sort of enjoyed in his stories is you've got sort of the the older, grizzled, burnt out veteran whose life was redeemed by sort of his interactions with this younger woman. And it worked, you've got that in Fifth Element and Leon, and to a certain extent in La Femme Nikita. So I thought I could see hints of it there, but I wanted Valerian to be older, more experienced. And it looked like two kids. Sort of
kids
on screen. So
can you believe that Dane DeHaan is 31 years old?
No, I can't,
because
he looks like
looking.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's where I thought, okay, maybe that's what I was struggling with in terms of the relationship. Is I wanted him to be that 40-something older guy that's got this history, and now he's willing to redeem him. And because I always get that out of the films of his that I enjoy. I like that journey that his male leads take, and here I don't have that. And I felt like it was like Besson took what has worked for him and he took it out of this film. And I don't know if it's just dedication to the source material, but I thought that may have been the dynamic that was missing. But everything else about this just, it was the craziness and world building that I loved in The Fifth Element. There's so much, wackiness going on, but there's an internal logic to it that I'm just thrilled to go along with. And he always takes me along on those journeys. So, that's, I can see those elements, and I love those components of this film. We get to discover so many different parts of Alpha, and we've got such great characters that we just, Bob, the like submarine driver guy, as, you get these small pieces and you're like, somehow he creates a character that there's a whole story there that he gets across about this guy. You want to know who this guy is. What is he doing? They're not these throwaway sort of generic characters. There's something interesting. And I guess that's all that work he does in the Bible for those characters makes it a rich environment. But if we don't have a good story to connect it all together, to me, it's, work in vain in a certain aspect, because they're not there to support the strong story. And I would rather have that, but I will take the entertaining world sort of as a consolation prize and enjoy that.
That's Bob should have been your Ruby Rod.
Bob should have been the Ruby Rod. That's
yes.
exactly right. And there were a lot of opportunities for a Ruby Rod character to come out, and they just never quite played out. But I have a thought experiment that I would like to run by you both.
Okay.
And just see what. And this is ever since I saw that great Nerd Writer video where he talks about recutting Passengers and starting with the second act and then going to the first act, changes the whole movie. Here you go. Okay. This is a casting change, and I would love to know what you think about how the film changes.
Yep.
Let's just swap. Just go ahead and swap Dane DeHaan and Clive Owen.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Dane DeHaan is such a great, creepy soldier guy.
Yep.
Mindless kind of, he would totally have done that. Yeah. And Clive Owen is the grizzled, great accent. He would have been a Valerian that I would love to have connected with. Now, I recognize that I'm older, and my kids love the movie as it is.
Oh.
So, I mean, they adored it. Like, they were ready to see it again. Yeah, right away.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
mine?
Immediately.
Oh, mine were like, it was fun. I said, would you watch it again? Well, yeah, maybe if it was on Netflix, since it's like free, then I'd probably maybe watch it again.
They loved it. That's interesting.
No, it was a ride. I mean, it was a ride.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But that is because I think it fits in with the story of if you have the younger general who makes that rash decision in combat and then tries to cover over, the consequences for to further his career versus brilliant. Yep. Let's do it. Let's recut it. Yeah.
Well, and that, I mean, if we jump to casting, I think we can talk about the fact that these actors weren't necessarily placed in the types of roles that were set up for them to succeed. I mean, that's the essence of the thought experiment that you just gave us, right, Pete? When we first see Laureline, I was imagining her as like a sort of a Katniss or like a Starbuck from Battlestar Galactica, right?
Oh, Starbuck.
And now
what
Starbuck.
A great comparison.
Well, and honestly, through BSG, I never really believed that Starbuck was as tough because of that actress. But that's what I was hoping for Laureline here, because she seemed to carry that really well. The hard parts of Jennifer Lawrence, she nailed. But then when the role called for a little bit more depth and a little bit of softness and talking talking about falling in love and all of a sudden this emotional thing, that's where the lack of chemistry, and Pete used the word charisma before, I never saw it between the two of them, because I felt like they were much better at doing the hard parts. And I don't mean hard saying difficult, the hard, the sort of the rough warrior soldier pieces, than they were about the softness necessary for the relationship. How did you guys feel about Dane and Kara pulling that off?
Well, first I have to say, are you telling me that Katie Sackhoff was not strong in Battlestar Galactica? Because we're going to have words.
I never believed it.
Are you kidding me?
I never believed it.
You just broke something in the world. I don't know what it is. Something just broke.
There's a great disturbance in the floor. I believe that because I believe that Kara was going to be badass throughout this whole thing, and she wasn't expected to be. They needed her to do something else. So I would have appreciated this sort of callousness to the Starbuck role, and maybe we could switch acting in a thought exercise that way.
I don't know. I going back to I can't even talk about Katie Sackhoff with you anymore. I have to put that to bed in favor of our relationship ongoing. And I think Kara, I struggle a little bit with Kara, and I do like her, but I think it's because I feel like I sort of discovered her in Paper Towns, which I adored. I thought she did a really terrific job. I haven't seen Tulip Fever, and so the rest of the films that I've seen her in, Suicide Squad, Pan, they also were not great films to showcase what she is capable of. And so I feel like I'm a little bit of an apologist here too, because I think she is capable of more, but I didn't really buy it here.
Yeah, she gets put in a weird role because it's just hard. It's like they couldn't settle on sort of the relationship. Like in Big Market, it's like, okay, it's clear, like, yeah, he's like the rebel, because it's like, yeah, he doesn't read the memo. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. When they put the dimensional hypercube thing on his arm, it's like, okay, you push this button here, and then when you come back, you push this. His box, malfunctions. She's trying to fix it. He's shooting things off. So it's clearly, like, to me, that's the dynamic of like, yeah, I'm Han Solo. I fly by the seat of my pants, and I sometimes get in over my head. And she's like the smart one who's always, bailing him out all the time. But
that's what I wanted too, Steve.
Right.
I wanted Han Solo and Princess Leia in Emperor Strikes Back.
Right, but then it turns
what about
into
like Wash and Zoe from
Yeah.
Firefly, right?
Yeah.
Like these are all the things.
But it turns out, it's always this like he's pulling rank on her thing, which became like this, he's ordering her around, so he's the one that's in charge, and she, concedes to that, except for the one point where he tells her to go back to get reinforcements, and she's like, no, I'm doing it this time. But it
talk about an unbelievable. You can't. We can't let. I'm sorry, Steve. You're on a roll, but we gotta hang a flag on that. It was terrible.
Yes, go back and get back up, and then no, and then she turns around and waits for him too. By the way.
It's so stupid. If backup is needed, someone should go get backup.
Yes, exactly.
No matter what, he should have gone to get backup to pay that off. And yeah. There's more story when he goes to get backup. Instead, they just they let it linger, as this really uncomfortable moment where she now is confirmed that she is totally useless.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and the character is really just created as an accessory to Valerian.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem is she's this accessory that's gonna fit whatever the story needs at that point. So
That's
she becomes this
terribly important
utility tool of like, okay, we need this. She needs to be this foil for him. She needs to serve this function in the plot. She's got to save him when he gets, dragged off into the red zone. So she's got to save him, but then he's got to turn around and save her before her, lobotomy dessert, scene. It
was tough for me.
Yeah. So who's the competent one? Who's the one that's really in charge of things? And it's just not clear. And so it's challenging, I think, in terms of not just the casting, but what they were given to do. And I, again, feel that there's potential in these actors, that I've seen them do more. They weren't given enough to do. Another part is I don't know how much of it is just the strain on an actor having to spend so much time like on blue screen sets, where so much of it is reacting to things that aren't there. and what that can do to their performance of where do you go.
Well, and that's to your point specifically, Steve. I mean, Delevingne said, of the 6 months that she was involved in shooting, she spent 2 weeks on a proper set.
Wow.
That is a lot of blue screen time.
Yeah.
This is really a cartoon.
Yes. Exactly.
And that's interesting for the whole thing. I mean, you talk about whether the characters were supposed to be competent or incompetent, and throughout the story, this goes back to the script, but there was this supposed to be an assumption of competence and then situational incompetence to move the story along, and that just it failed both characters, and I can't imagine what a challenge that is for those actors to try and pull that off.
Yeah, and I have to imagine that the integrity of the character as they are performing is such that, how can you possibly be in the situation and not believe that you're missing some incredible intentional layups, like the emotional layups, the payoff of the relationship. Like, while you're performing these characters, can't I do X to resolve this, because people are gonna know, and that was certainly the trouble I had with it.
So we mentioned Clive Owen already. He still was Clive Owen, right? He was wonderful in what he did.
I regret that they gave him a "you can't handle the truth" moment. I thought that was a bit played. His final sequence, we don't see much of him through the course of the movie. He's mummified in the blue goo, and he's taken away.
He's the big blue MacGuffin for this.
He
whole
is the
thing.
big blue MacGuffin of the whole thing, and that is to the discredit of the film, underusing Clive Owen.
That was sarcasm.
Yes.
So other folks getting right into the stunt casting. What about Rihanna?
So watching
Why was
this
she in the movie?
My wife just leaned over me and she's like, "Why is this here? Why is this even necessary?" And I'm thinking, is it supposed to be, Valerian's struggle with his, his past with women? Is this a temptation for him that he's going to rise above that? Maybe, but I don't get that. And then is it to introduce clearly a character that he's going to need for his next steps? But then clearly, it was horrible. We get through the big fat battle. They fall out of the garbage pit, and it's like she's struggling. She's like, "Oh, I must have been wounded in the fight." And it's like, really, you don't know, and then you're going to disintegrate into sand because clearly, okay, purpose served. We don't know what else to do with you. You're dead, so we can move on with the story. It was
this is all as opposed to, oh no, I must have been wounded on the stripper pole.
Right.
Somewhere between the stripper pole and the street, I must have been wounded. Oh dear. How will I ever figure? I guess we'll never know.
Right.
She really didn't do a whole lot when it comes to the actual heavy lifting of the role, because my thought coming into the movie was she was going to serve a musical purpose similar to the aria in Fifth Element.
Oh,
I just
sure.
assumed that this was
that would have been
part
very
of the best
cool.
on thing, but she didn't actually do the pole dancing. They had a pole dancer in for that, and then she was the voice when she was no longer Rihanna. But not. I mean, it just was really odd. I like Rihanna, but it seemed very strange that she was in this movie.
Yeah, it was another visual excuse, right, to have a familiar face and showcase some incredible motion capture stuff. I mean, that's really what. Again, as most of the movie is an excuse to showcase incredible motion capture stuff, which was really great. Credit to Claire Tran, who played Bubble when it wasn't Rihanna shaped, and I thought she did a really fine job.
Which part was that?
Claire, anytime you didn't see Bubble as the shape, Claire Tran was doing the motion control of that character.
Oh, so with the blue blob.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was trying to understand how Claire was the blue blob. That makes sense. Other folks that came up as surprising familiar faces. It's good that you bring it up that way. We had Ethan Hawke.
Ethan Hawke is, at this point, what isn't he in?
Yeah.
Right.
If there's going to be a surprise cast, it's probably Ethan Hawke. So,
There was actually an audible cheer when he showed up in the movie.
Oh, finally.
In my theater.
Oh, okay.
He's a fan favorite, I think.
Yeah. Oh, he was great, though, too. I mean, I really enjoyed him
his
as
thing.
Jolly the Pimp.
Yeah.
He was really fine. He was funny.
Jolly the Pimp. Also, we had Herbie Hancock as a defense minister. The purpose, it must be for a familiar face, right? Is that what we're saying in these things?
Although,
Stunt
is that
casting?
really, I mean, do you think Herbie Hancock is used as familiar face?
No, because I saw the name
As
in the
a
credits.
musician?
Yeah, I saw his name in the
Probably not.
credits and thought he was
Yeah.
going to play like again, there would be a musical number with him. So yeah, it caught me off guard.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't think it was a familiar face. I think this was probably a friend. And just like Louis Leterrier, who was the captain welcoming the Mercuries in the opening sequence, and Leterrier's director of Now You See Me and The Incredible Hulk and Transporter and Clash. I mean, he's a director, and he's a friend of, and got a brief role there. I thought that was.
We have that, and then you have Rutger Hauer, who shows up at the, for an instant at the beginning, and then so clearly the John Goodman voice of the Jabba the Hutt impersonator. So
it would have been better if we had the Simon Pegg in Star Wars moment, right? Where it was, oh my God, I had no idea that was him. That was amazing. And in this case, I knew it was John Goodman right away. I happen to really like John Goodman, so it was fine, but I like the surprise.
Sure, I agree with that. We've talked about the conflicted nature that we have about this. I think from a production standpoint, it all sounds like we're all pretty positive.
Yeah, where you're like, you want to put this on, and watch. There's just beautiful sections to watch again. I would love to watch the whole big market piece again, because it's such like a mind-bendy, trippy thing to think about, and just the way the choices that were made of when you've got characters in different dimensions and how they can and can't interact with each other and how they're visually presented on the screen, I thought was really clever, done really well. I love that piece to it. There's big chunks of alpha that I think just come together so well. And it's like, I want to greatest hits clips, out of this movie, just to watch in awe of all these pieces come together.
Yeah, well, and I would definitely wait in line at Bisonland for my 3D big market adventure.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I think there's at least 5 or 6 rides in this movie that I would take my fast pass and gladly jump to the front of.
Yes.
That becomes a really creepy Bisonland. That's a really creepy place.
There's some fun things we can do with that, maybe.
I want to go free diving in the big blue world. I can't wait.
And
hold your breath, kids.
JJ, it's not a fast pass; it's a multi-pass.
Multi-pass.
There we go. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy. That's so much smarter than what I said.
That is so good. I'm with you. I mean, this is the Fifth Element really defined a generation of AV nerds toolkits, right? When you start, the DVD helped you tune your home theater system, right? The sound was incredible. The color was incredible. It was just an incredible production. And I think, more than a film about, what's on screen, this is about creating a legacy disc that's appropriate for the next generation of home theater nerds. I think this is it is a beautiful, beautiful piece of work.
How much of that do you think had to do with cinematography? It's really tough in a film like this to think about camera versus computer.
Yeah, no, I actually think it has a lot to do with it. I really love watching the way Arbogast and team work with the camera and blue screen, and it's of note that the Fifth Element had included 200 VFX shots, and as Besson says, he thinks it was the last traditional tools sci-fi film, really. I mean, that sure. Was crafted not on blue screen and motion control, and this has 2,734 VFX shots in Valerian. That's a significant increase, and so to watch him make this, it's just like any other that was sort of pioneered through these other huge films, Avatar and Star Wars and all these things. But to watch the camera shooting in 3D space and to have Besson be able to actually see where the camera is and where the camera moves and how it's interacting with the actors, even though the actors can't see what they're interacting with, it's one of those dynamics of filmmaking that is a dramatic revision of what they're used to. And I think to Arbogast's credit, being able to work in that space is an enormous conceptual challenge. Like I struggle with interpreting how to set up a shot in that universe.
Well, and coincidentally, it's actually the big market effect in real life. Right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, you're actually asking, and that's why the big market sequence here, I think, is potentially really profound, because it's taking what actors are doing on a regular basis with these visual effects movies now and interacting with another dimension, right, from the blue screen. So it's now putting that on screen as part of life imitating art, imitating life, right? It's kind of a special thing, and I agree with you. I think from a cinematography standpoint, from a cinematographer's mind, having to really envision where the camera is set to capture reactions to fakeness, I think that's something that requires other dimensional thinking.
So speaking of camera placement, there was one shot that just totally pulled me out of the movie, and I just thought that's a really weird choice, and it just caught me completely off guard. It's when they're going to get the whatever neurological jellyfish, and they're in Bob's ship or whatever, and they snatch the jellyfish, and then the big thing is coming after him, and the ship is getting knocked around, and there's a shot where Valerian gets she gets thrown out of her seat, and then it's a shot from like a security camera footage. It's all black and white and grainy, and showing her getting like flung out of her seat, and then she gets back in her seat, and Bob tells her, "Yeah, see, I told you to put your seatbelt on." It's like a 3-second shot or something, and it's only that camera angle, that type is only used once. We don't throughout all of Alpha. We're not using like seeing it from the perspective of security cameras or anything. I thought, why? We've got if we have virtual sets, none of this is real. Why limit us to showing it like that? What's my point of view? Yeah,
right.
They must have had to do it, or
because there was nothing else. Yeah,
or felt that they had to do it. So there must be some practical reason why they had to use it, or for story purposes, they felt they had to. Because the camera was set back, and none of those other shots in that vessel were from the back. So there must be a reason from it that we won't necessarily know.
That's right. And because you have no sense of space without that shot. You have no sense of what the entire capsule looks like.
And did you notice, so now there was a bunch of ADR in place in a lot of places. Did you see the ADR with the jellyfish in particular? They took out her swearing, and she didn't really swear. I mean, she said ass, but the joke, it really was a joke line, which she said, put my head up this thing's ass, right? But she changed it and said, put my head in its body through ADR, which was really sloppy ADR. And there were a couple times in the film where
why
they
was
did
that necessary again?
Are they working with rating? I mean, what
rating? It was a PG-13.
Yeah, you can. That's nothing, right?
Right.
I want to going with the effects, talking about 3D, right? So I had mentioned in our Slack channel before we saw the film why anyone would try to see this without 3D, because my thought going in was that it was going to be this 3D extravaganza. I didn't feel that way with what I saw here. And specifically in the scheduling, there are far less 3D versions available to see than there are non-3D versions. For example, in my local theater, it had a full run of non-3D versions and only 2 in 3D. In the course of one day. Were there any effects that really felt strong for you in a 3D aspect for this movie?
Well, for me, it's all about the expanse of space, and anywhere you have shots or you have stars and ships and planets on multiple planes in space. That's kind of a go-to test for good 3D. And I felt like this hit the Avatar mark for me in that regard. Like I felt like like the stars were floating near me in a way that when I was looking at the screen, I was looking into space, right? And I thought that was really lovely. And to his credit, I mean, Besson says, the best 3D that he'd ever seen was Avatar, and that's actually what caused him to pause and not make a bunch of 3D movies. Like his work just didn't really lend itself to the Avatar-ness of 3D until now. And I thought it was terrific. The big market was great 3D for me.
Well, that's interesting, because I didn't find the sort of relevance for a 3D film here that I was expecting. And I've recently turned the corner on 3D, specifically coming off of Doctor Strange, which I thought was the best use of 3D that I've seen.
Yeah, it was excellent
as of yet. And this just felt like more of the same to me. And I think my expectations here were too high, because I really expected to be blown away by it. It felt like a very normal movie experience for me. And now, Steve, you said you didn't see it in 3D.
No, just not regular, 2D.
And how did you feel about that? Were there any scenes where you saw them and you said, "Oh, wow, I'd like to see that in 3D"?
I thought perhaps, Valerian sort of when he's, charging through the walls, the way that was shot, of sort of that progression through the depths. And then perhaps maybe when he's falling, trying to catch the butterfly, lures, that there might be some interesting depth there, but it wasn't anything that I thought, wow, I'm missing out on something, that there's a, dimension that was adding something to the story that was going to make this sequence even more so. Because it's sort of like already ramped up to 10 in just visual stimulus. So I didn't know that the 3D would take it up to a level where I would say, wow, this is going to be really immersive. I would be interested to see what the big market piece looks like. But for me, that's something where I'd like to see them do something interesting with when they're sort of in the desert reality, that it would be 2D. And then when he's in his interdimensionality, that it would be 3D, to have somebody play with format that way, where we're shifting between 2D and 3D between two different realities, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear, I guess, from the 2D perspective. Whenever I get a choice, I always see something in 2D. It's just with this one, my expectations were a little high.
Oh, sure.
We talked a bit about sound as well. Should we bring up things about editing, music, sound? What kind of things were positive for you guys in those respects?
It's interesting about the score. I actually am a fan of Desplat's work, but I didn't really think much about it. And the first comment out of my daughter's mouth was, I really like the score.
Okay.
Do you guys have a sense memory of the score that I missed?
I noticed it at times, especially with the space fights. But that being said, I don't remember themes. So
I need to go back and actually listen to it and give it some time. Because
speaking of space fights, now that you mention that, did that seem like ridiculously long? Like at the end when we're getting like the story again of when the planet's destroyed from sort of the Clive Owen character's point of view. It's not just like, oh, we get a flash of like, this is what happened. It felt like 5 or 6 minutes of just flying around, ships shooting each other, which we already knew was happening. And to me, it just felt like, well, we're going to give them space battle, so let's give them a 5-minute space battle sequence.
Well, that's about as long as it takes for you to complete the ride. So,
okay. Thank you.
That's why. No,
you're right.
Your point,
okay.
your question's valid, because I felt like that in a lot of sequences. I actually felt that the early sequence when they showed the planet the first time, when they were giving us the background of that story, was just too long. I get why it's important, and I thought lots of it was really great. But in general, most of the things when they were doing story exposition through visual storytelling, I felt that it was a little indulgent and long.
I think that you say the same thing about the entire film. I mean, coming in at 137 minutes,
Whoa.
It was a long movie, and I think it was probably about a half hour, maybe more, over long.
Yeah,
it was like 1.5 Dunkirks.
Other stuff, I felt that the relationship dynamics, the gender dynamics between the two were pretty traditional. And I think that goes back to my earlier point about wanting a more tough Laureline here. Now you guys said both your daughters saw the movie, right?
Yeah. And
did they bring up anything about that?
No, like I said, they were like, yeah, it was fun, but it didn't really engage them that much. They weren't really talking about it that much. There was nothing. Yeah, I don't think this is a character where they're like, wow, this is a really neat role model for me or anything. It was just, they sort of walked away indifferent.
My daughter did not have any comment on the relationship between Kara and Dane, but and maybe this is a sign about how anemic that relationship was. During the stripper pole scene, she did look at me and she says, wow, she's strong. I want to be like her. Oh. And
That's what a dad wants to hear.
I clutched my heart and sunk down in my seat. Now, I have to know in my heart of hearts that she did not mean what she actually said.
Right.
And we'll be having that conversation later. But, to credit, that is a very physical endeavor, so to speak, and requires a great deal of core strength. And how can I not be enthusiastic about physical fitness?
That's a rhetorical question, right? Because I can answer it. How you could not be excited about that in lots of different ways.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, specifically, so I wanted to ask if it's kid friendly because so for the show, we're watching it for the show this weekend, and my 7-year-old, and always with my 7-year-old, my 5-year-old wants to do it too. I was a little bit concerned with that scene in particular, but I want to get your guys' take on it because your kids are obviously older. Outside of that, too, I felt like there's a lot of parts in the story where my kids are going to turn to me as a 5 and 7-year-old and ask me why things are happening.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things which, as a moviegoer, I don't have a problem with because I don't want it to be spoon-fed for me. But for kids of a certain age, they're going to ask, why is the planet, why are the things falling out of the sky, things like that, and it doesn't explain that to you. How do you guys feel that it'll hit with younger kids?
Well, I don't think it's a younger kid movie.
No,
I mean, I felt like I was on the fence with my 12-year-old, and I'm not. It was no problem for him, but under 11, 10, I think it's probably not appropriate. I would have definitely second-guessed that.
That's a really hard thing for us to do in today's climate because PG-13 is a crazy rating. It could mean all different kinds of things. Yeah. And outside of that, like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, there's a lot of innuendo in them, but we feel completely comfortable showing those movies to the boys.
Interesting.
They love them, right? So now they see Valerian, they see a trailer for Valerian and something, and you see these two characters who are clearly cast as preteens, even though they're 31 and 28 or something. Yeah. But they want to see it. So I don't know. I'm going both ways about it.
Well, maybe that's a wait for rental, so you've got an opportunity to just pause and say, okay, well, you're going to find out, or, because, at first, even I, when we're on, Planet Mule, and all of a sudden the sky is dark and stuff starts falling out, I'm like, okay, is this a meteor shower?
Yeah,
what are these things? And then it's like, or an invasion. And then it's like, we see like, a ship come barreling through, and it's like, okay, well, that's debris from a ship. Then I'm like, oh, okay, this is debris raining down on the planet from this battle. Okay. And then we see the big ship come down. But yeah, there's that there. I mean, even all of the sort of rituals or ceremonies or whatever that's going on in Mule, because you have pretty much no dialogue, or no English dialogue to explain what the heck is going on with these little pearls and the weird, rat that, spews them out. Yeah, there's a lot of strange things that I think can, for little kids, they're going to want to know why, because it is spending so much time there. So to me, that's more of a home rental pause to have a conversation and move forward. And that gives you the opportunity to blow past things that, maybe you're like, oh, well, then he goes into Paradise Grove and he's going to come out with this shapeshifter. You don't need to see all this dancing. Right. That's for girls. You don't want to watch. You don't want to watch her dancing.
Let's go get our popcorn refund.
Daddy watches that again later. You don't need to see that
now. We talked a little bit about the numbers on it. It's doing terrible here. You said the 26th in Western Europe, Pete. Is that right? Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. It's there over the next 4 or 5 weeks into the middle of September. It's going to open throughout Western Europe.
So I would say there's going to be a lot of fake news about how well this movie's doing over the next couple weeks until we find out really how it hits in Europe, which I think is where it's definitely going to hit. Now it's time to rank it, because we like ranking things here. We don't have a song with Tommy tonight, but if you folks out there in the world haven't done so yet, you should check out www.flickchart.com. It's one of my favorite websites in the world. It provides a fun way to look at the movies that you love and hate, whether you feel that way about it, by creating this kind of tournament style stack ranking system. On this show and on all the Next Reel shows, we go through the exercise here so that you can find the special stack rankings that we have for our show here. And you can find our Flick Chart at flickchart.com/TNR Filmboard. Pete.
Up first, we've got Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets versus Alien Covenant.
Oh, wow.
I hope you guys can agree on this one.
Valerian? I will watch Valerian again. I will watch it for big market and fun, because I'll default to doesn't make me angry the way Covenant did in some aspects. Because
I was going to guess that you guys would say Valerian on this one.
I'm going to say Covenant on this one.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think you should put it for Valerian then.
No, you're Valerian?
But I haven't seen Alien Covenant.
Oh.
That's my assumption. That's
wow. Then your vote is null and void.
Your vote doesn't count.
Remember, I have seen none of the Alien movies.
Oh no, it would be a principled win on either one of these. So let's do it, Steve. Yeah. All right. Are you ready?
Okay.
All right.
1, 2, 3. Rock.
I am crushed.
Valerian
Crush.
Valerian it is.
Okay.
Next up, we have Valerian versus Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Oh, apes. Easily.
Yeah, it's apes. Hands down. Valerian versus Jurassic World.
Jurassic World.
Jurassic World. Yes.
I'm Jurassic World as well. Although the poster that came up on Flickchart is the 3 little duck monkeys, the duck monkey bats.
I like them.
Yeah,
We
they
didn't
were
talk
fun.
about those characters. They
No.
were fun. Yeah, I like them. Valerian versus the Mummy.
Oh, this is a good one. I'm actually going to pick Valerian.
Yeah, I'm Valerian too on this one.
Yeah.
Valerian versus Avengers Age of Ultron.
Ultron.
Ultron. Valerian versus Snowden.
Snowden.
Valerian. Snowden it is. Congratulations, gentlemen. Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets is now number 26.
Out of?
Right between the Mummy and Snowden. And
Wow.
that is out of 60. So it's in the top
Okay.
half.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that first pick, we had to go to the mattresses on it, so it could have easily gone the other way. On the Letterboxd ranking, out of 5 stars, I give it 2.
I feel like I was coming into the show tonight at a 3.
Yeah.
I'm going to knock it down to a 2.5.
2.5.
I found myself getting pretty angsty over the terribleness of the script.
No, and it's funny because that's exactly where I am. I came in, I think, thinking 3, but yeah, 2.5.
So that's quick math or not quick math to say 2.5, 2.5, and 2.
Are we do we round up to 2.5? Is that how we're going to do it?
Sure, why not? That's clever, right in the middle.
And is that wait a minute, is that a heart or a no heart?
Oh, that's right. We have to say heart or no heart. For me,
Yeah.
it's a no heart. I do not like this movie.
I like it because I don't hate it. To me, a not like it signifies like disdain for this movie, and I don't have that. It's fun. It's flawed. I like.
I'm definitely a heart. I think there's a lot to be. I mean, in terms of just straight up craft of the production itself, putting the visuals on screen, there's a lot to be proud of in this movie. I'm definitely a heart, even and I'll see it again. It didn't make me angry.
Sounds like a James Cameron movie to me.
Ooh.
Yeah. Okay, what's next? Where do we go from here? Next month, the Film Board is going to tackle another adaptation with Stephen King's The Dark Tower. And both you guys are out for that one, right? Why are you laughing?
Because I'm thankful to not be on that.
Why? What? Wait. Talk about that. What? So you're thankful to not be on that because?
Because it's going to be a hot mess. that movie is
A hot mess with Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey.
No. Because
God dang it!
There's such anticipation and expectation of that, and
That's me.
And I also remember you had such hope and high expectations when we went and saw Ghost in the Shell, and
Yeah.
we saw how you felt about that one. No, it comes down to, I think, tackling something that's so big that should be basically a mini series, and then some of the people involved with it have just disappointed me so much with their ability to adapt things that I know this movie's just going to make me angry. I haven't even read the Dark Tower stuff, but I just have such respect for Stephen King that I think that this is going to just be another one of those.
You're right.
No.
I have to see it.
Sure,
but I'm
go ahead.
terrified that
Yeah.
it's going to be terrible.
I think rightfully so, JJ. I'm with Steve. It's going to be a dumpster fire. I really think, and I actually I also really love Stephen King's work, and the Dark Tower was damn near impenetrable for me. It took me months and months to read that book. I haven't read any of the other ones because it was it was just not an enjoyable experience for me. And so I know I'm a rarity. The people that I meet and we talk about the Dark Tower, and you're one of them. I'm the guy who doesn't get it. I get that, but taking that experience and making it a movie is I think that's
well, and talking about you guys coming down, that means we're going to have Andy and Tommy next month, and it's interesting because they probably were the most adamantly against Valerian. So it's going to be interesting to see how the tone of their conversation next month differs from our tone this month. I'm going to be the one constant, so hopefully we'll see how my expectations for the Dark Tower comes through. Pete, on the weekly show, you guys are just coming back, right?
We are. We've taken July off from our show, and we're coming back out of our hiatus. And our first show back will be episode, I can't believe I'm saying this, 400. Woo. And in honor of, not really in honor of, this is complete coincidence.
For fun.
For episode 400, we'll begin our 13-episode Star Trek series with Star Trek the Motion Picture. So
nice.
That's one of those series that I think it's one of those when we tell people about the show that they always say, oh, how do you feel about Star Trek? We've never done a Star Trek movie on the show, so it's about time.
And you can do them all, right?
All in a row. All
So
13.
shouldn't it just be episode 400 is 13 hours long to talk about, and it's like episode 400, part A, part B, part C.
Yeah, and in fact, we'll release Star Trek as a separate series too, so you can just listen to it. You can binge it.
You guys mentioned Dunkirk. I'm going to go see, I think back to back, I'm going to see Spider-Man Homecoming and Dunkirk this weekend. Both of those films I was not excited to see, but because of all the hype, everybody's got me up to go see them now. You guys have seen them, right?
I have not seen Dunkirk
I haven't
yet.
seen Dunkirk. Spider-Man
I thought
is
you had
fun.
seen them.
No, I still don't know if I will. I do. If you want to cram something else in there, go see War for the Planet of the Apes. Though
That's a video movie for me,
it's such a good finish to that trilogy. It just works so well.
And Spider-Man, I adored Spider-Man. I had a blast,
so
and
much
Tom
fun.
Holland is fantastic.
Yes.
But once you see that movie, if you did not know much of Tom Holland, if you weren't a big Billy Elliot fan, go search for the Zendaya Tom Holland lip sync battle on YouTube.
Okay. This is the LL Cool J show?
It's like 5 minutes. Please watch that. I present that to you here without additional comment.
Okay.
I will comment on the Slack channel when I watch it because I got to see the movie first and then we'll do it. But the point about all that is that there's amazing summer stuff out there for everyone to go see, and we are not even done with releases for this year, so we'll see some more adaptation fun next month. So I'm out there doing that tomorrow. So you guys have a fantastic night. Peter Wright, good night.
Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure.
See you later, Steve Sarmento.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for listening to the Film Board tonight. Remember, you can hang out with us on the interwebs by joining up as a patron on patreon.com/thenextreel. If not, that's okay, but consider giving us a rating and review on iTunes. Those things help make us more and more visible to the people who haven't yet heard of us. Because when the movie ends, our conversation begins. Till next time.